But so yesterday we started this cumulus parameterization, and we just discussed about the introduction part. We also talked that if there is a rainfall of 2 centimeter per day, then the amount of heating generated because of the condensation of moisture required for the 2 centimeter of rainfall can be as much as 5 degrees centigrade per day, right? And 2 centimeter per day rainfall is quite common. We have much more rainfall than that, especially in the tropics. So if there is 10 centimeter rainfall in a day, that would imply that the heating could be 5 times more, that means 25 degrees centigrade per day. And we don't see that there is so much of rise in temperature in a day, because we do get so much of rainfall. We don't see so much of rise in temperature. So that means there are other mechanisms operating in the atmosphere which compensates the warming because of the cumulus convection or condensation. We also discussed yesterday that the main goal of cumulus parameterization is in 3 parts. Number 1 is to compute the cumulus warming, because the clouds are warmer than the surrounding environment. And so when the clouds dissipate, they give up their excess temperature to the surrounding environment and thereby raise the temperature of the air or heat the atmosphere. Second is cumulus moistening. The second goal of cumulus parameterization is to compute the cumulus moistening. That means the excess moisture which clouds carry up in the atmosphere, when the clouds die, they give up their excess moisture to the surrounding air, and the surrounding air becomes moister than the earlier, right? So this is the second effect that the cumulus parameterization computes. And the third important effect that it computes is the cumulus rainfall or convective rainfall, right? Rainfall because of the convective clouds. Yesterday we discussed that generally the rainfall is partitioned into 2 parts, right? One is the convective rainfall and other is the
stratiform.
Exactly, stratiform rainfall or large scale precipitation, also the non-convective precipitation, all these things we said. So the goal of the cumulus parameterization is to compute the cumulus precipitation, that is convective precipitation, cumulus warming, and cumulus drying. Right? In this context, did I talk about the apparent heat source and moisture sink earlier in your previous semester or any of the previous classes? Did I talk about that?
So previous semester we have discussed.
Okay, good, very good. So do you remember, all of you, what is apparent heat source and apparent moisture sink? Everybody is quiet. So anyway, for continuity, I'll once again explain, right? Apparent heat source. That was the concept given by Wheel, Herbert Wheel and Malthus way back in 1958. Yeah, they were the tropical meteorologists, right? Tropical meteorologists. What they were trying to do is, they were at the time, since many things were not clear. So they thought that the only heating of the atmosphere is because of the solar radiation, nothing else. So they thought that the thermodynamic equation, for example, when they sum up each term of this thermodynamic equation based upon the observation, right? Then the net or the total sum should be equal to the radiative heating rate, right? If radiation was the only source of heating of the atmosphere, and the total sum of the thermodynamic energy equation based upon the observation should match with the observed radiative heating rate. But to their surprise, it did not match. There was a large imbalance between the radiative heating of the atmosphere and the some of the terms computed from the thermodynamic equation. And similarly, they also tried to balance the moisture continuity equation. And they found that when they sum up the terms of the moisture continuity equation, then they had some residual extra term, extra moistening. And they were just wondering where from this extra moistening is coming, or where from the extra heating is coming. And then they made a hypothesis that in the atmosphere there must be some extra source of heating and moistening, which is not able to balance, because of which these equations are not able to balance. And they named this extra source of heating as apparent heat source, and which they conceptualized that this apparent heat source must be coming from the clouds, because when the clouds form, the water vapor condense, and the latent heat of condensation, which is released because of the condensation of water vapor, that also warms the atmosphere. So clouds act as a source of heating in the atmosphere in addition to the radiative heating. Right? In fact, radiative heating, if you look at the magnitude, is much smaller than the heating because of the condensation or convective heating. Right? And similarly, clouds act as a sink of moisture rather than saying source of the moisture. Clouds act as a sink of the moisture, because in the net, when the clouds dissipate or die out after precipitation, after rainfall, then the atmosphere loses the moisture, because rainfall drains out the moisture content of the atmosphere. So it is a sink. Clouds act as a sink for the moisture, but source for the heat. So it's called apparent heat source and apparent moisture sink. A very interesting, very important concept, because the entire cumulus parameterization verification is based on the validation of the apparent heat source and the moisture sink. Whoever develops the new cumulus parameterization schemes, already so many schemes are available. Among them, of course, the two are the most fundamental schemes, which are called the CORE scheme, and the other is the Arakawa-Seward scheme. And rest, about 8-9 variants of the cumulus parameterizations are either based upon the CORE-type scheme or based on the Arakawa-Seward scheme. But eventually, when you develop any new scheme, you try to verify with the observation that whether your scheme is realistic or not. And for that, we compute the apparent heat source based upon the observation, and also apparent moisture sink based upon the observation of temperature and the specific humidity at different points on the surface, and calculate the apparent heat source and moisture sink based upon the observation. And the same thing is also calculated or predicted by the new cumulus parameterization scheme, and they're matched. If they're matching, that means the cumulus parameterization scheme is good or is realistic. If they don't match, that means the parameterization scheme is not accurate. Okay, so these are the two measures of the cumulus parameterization, a very important term, very important concept. So you should remember this. You might get questions, write short notes on apparent heat source and moisture sink, like that. Okay. So having said that, now let's see our large scale equations of the atmosphere, governing the atmosphere, that you already know, right? Momentum equation, the thermodynamic equation, the moisture continuity equation, right? So where do these clouds enter in those equations, right? Now this, on the screen that you see, there are three equations prominently written. The first one is the thermodynamic equation. Now let me start the laser pointer. Okay. So thermodynamic equation in some form is written here. Second is the moisture continuity equation, and third is the momentum equation. Okay. Now in the thermodynamic equation, most of these terms are standard notations that you already are familiar with. For example, theta is the temperature, QR is the radiativity rate. Okay. C bar is the large scale condensation, L is the latent heat of condensation, Cp you already know, right? Heat capacity is equal to, again, similar terms, L by Cp pi times C bar star minus del by del P of W prime theta prime minus del dot of B prime theta prime. Okay. Now, this is thermodynamic equation in some form, right? In which the terms are written in such a way that all terms on the right hand side are because of the subgrid scale processes. Subgrid scale processes, right? And all the terms on the left hand side are the large scale terms. Terms because of the large scale processes. You remember we discussed about the subgrid scale processes yesterday? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. So the subgrid scale processes include all the processes which are smaller than the size of the grid box of the model, right? Which can be your cumulus convection, it can be your eddies, right? It can be your turbulence and all sorts of things, right? So here the terms are written in such a way that the right hand side terms now account for all the subgrid scale processes. For example, this is the subgrid scale condensation, whereas this C bar is the large scale condensation, right? Then similarly, this is the vertical transport of the heat because of the subgrid scale processes, and this is the horizontal transport of heat because of the subgrid scale processes, right? So subgrid scale transport of heat vertically as well as horizontally. Similarly, this is for the moisture continuity equation. Also, these terms on the right side are because of the subgrid scale processes. Okay, and also momentum equation. Now you may wonder that how the clouds are affecting the momentum equation, right? So how the clouds affect the momentum equation? Can somebody say how the clouds can affect the momentum equation? Because all the left hand terms are all standard, like Coriolis force is there, pressure gradient force is there, frictional force is there, right? And the right hand side terms, we said that they are the subgrid scale terms. So who can say that now how clouds can affect the momentum equation? Can somebody guess? No? No one? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, the clouds can affect the momentum equation because it can transport the divergence, it can transport the vorticity from one level to another level, right? Convection currents. When the convection currents form, now it rises upward, right? Convection, heat transport mechanism, convection, right? When the thermals rises, when the clouds rises, it can carry with it the momentum of one layer to another layer, right? It can carry the vorticity of one layer to another layer. So therefore, it can affect the momentum equation also, right? And so thus, the subgrid scale processes, including the convection or clouds, affect the thermodynamic equation, the moisture continuity equation, as well as the momentum equation. So now the purpose of this cumulus parameterization lecture is to know that how these subgrid scale processes, because of the cumulus convection, are computed in the model. Now for thermodynamic equation, for the moisture continuity equation, and for the momentum equation. Okay. So we talk about the cumulus parameterization. Now you know that cumulus is the name of the cloud, and the clouds can be shallow cloud, and it can also be deep cloud. The cumulus cloud or the convective clouds can be shallow as well as deep, right? And therefore, the parameterization of shallow convection or shallow clouds is done differently than the parameterization of the deep clouds, because now the difference in the dynamics, the mechanism. Right? For example, now this diagram illustrates a shallow cloud on the left-hand side and a deep cloud on the right-hand side. Now, when does the shallow clouds form? You know that, right? When there is no synoptic scale, low-level convergence, only shallow clouds can form, right? Because clouds can become deeper only when there is strong forcing, convergence, or strong vertical velocity, right? To take thermals upward, or a strong warming, a strong heat of the thermals. Then only it can rise up, strong buoyancy, then only it can rise up. So when there is no synoptic scale low-level convergence, and in other words, when the temperature of the parcel with respect to the surrounding air is not much high, then the clouds will be shallow, right? Shallow clouds. Whereas when there is a strong large-scale convergence or synoptic scale convergence, when there is a strong difference or large difference between the temperature of the thermals or the clouds and then that of the surrounding air, then it will be more buoyant and it can rise further, become more deeper. And also, because of the large scale convergence, there will be vertical velocity, rising motion. So vertical velocity is positive. See? Temperature excess. This is actually temperature excess over the environment. Excess of the temperature of the particle with respect to the environment is excess. So the temperature excess is there in a deeper level. The large scale velocity, the vertical velocity is positive in a deeper level. So therefore, the deeper clouds will form. Right? Depth of the cumulus cloud is proportional to the temperature excess and the vertical velocity above the condensation level. Right? The condensation level. So these are the different mechanisms by which shallow convection or shallow clouds form and the deep convection or the deep convective clouds form. Well, this is a well-known fact now, but it was actually realized long ago, way back in 1975, by the study of Bates in 1975, Somalia in 1976, Coe in 1965, before that, right? And of course, later on by TDK 84. Actually, it was the TDK onwards when the shallow convection was represented in the model explicitly. Otherwise, they were just thinking that probably it will take care of automatically. When we take care of the convection parameterization, it should take care, but it was not. So TDK developed a scheme especially for the shallow convection parameterization, and afterward, lots of errors which used to come in the model, simulation of temperature and moisture, especially in the lower levels. That error vanished after that. So parameterization of shallow convection is very important. If it is not parameterized properly, then there will be no efficient transport of the heat from lower level of the atmosphere to the upper level of the atmosphere, right? In other words, heat will just get accumulated in the lower levels, and the model atmosphere will get unnecessarily artificially warm. And similarly, the excess of moisture will just remain confined to the lower atmospheric layers, and it will become artificially moist, and that will cause a lot of error, right, in the result. So, because of the shallow cumulus parameterization, these accumulated temperature in the lower layers of the atmosphere, accumulated moisture in the lower layers of the atmosphere are ventilated or transported upwards, and that model atmosphere becomes more elastic. Right? So let's see now how this shallow cumulus parameterization is done. Okay. Basically, it is done in two ways, very two simple ways. You know that the shallow convection is controlled by surface heat and moisture fluxes. Right? And so we can write the rate of change of temperature because of the shallow cumulus cloud. Cu indicates cumulus. Right? So the rate of change of temperature because of the shallow cumulus cloud can be related to the vertical transport of the heat flux, surface heat and moisture fluxes, right? Del H by del Z, where H is the heat flux defined by this expression. H is equal to Cp times rho bar, Py is Cp, all the standard terms that Kt is the exchange coefficient, right? Similarly, the vertical rate of change of a specific humidity with time because of the shallow cumulus convection can be related to the rate of change of moisture flux in the vertical. right? And is given by this expression. Q is equal to rho bar KQ times del Q bar by del Z, right? Where KQ is the exchange coefficient. So this is the heat flux. So the rate of change of the specific humidity because of the shallow inverse convection is parameterized by this expression. Okay, so this is one way of parameterizing the shallow convection. The other way is to simply again parameterize by using the drag coefficient and using the difference between the surface temperature and the lowest atmospheric layer, right? So this is given by these two expressions. For example, the rate of change of temperature with time because of the shallow cumulus cloud can also be written by this expression rho bar times CD, where this is the drag coefficient, this is the wind speed, and Ts minus T0, where Ts is the temperature of the surface, T0 is the temperature at a reference level, okay, above the surface. And similarly, the rate of change of a specific humidity with time because of the shallow cumulus clouds is parameterized by this way, this expression, okay, where CD is the drag coefficient, B is the wind speed, L is the latent heat of condensation, CP is the specific heat, and again QS minus Q naught, where QS is the saturation specific humidity or specific humidity at the surface, and this is the specific humidity at the reference level. So these are the two simple ways to parameterize the shallow cumulus convection in the models, okay. And this was not known till TDK did it in 1984, right? So this is very important, okay. We'll see later on in Archival Super scheme, although now we have got a spectrum of clouds, etc., but we'll see that now. Even then, sometimes we have to separately parameterize the convection. No. So that was about the parameterization of shallow clouds. Now the next is the parameterization of the deep clouds. How the deep clouds are parameterized, or how the effects of the deep clouds are calculated in the model. Okay. Now, deep clouds form when there is a strong low-level convergence of moisture in a conditionally unstable atmosphere. You know that, right? Atmosphere is conditionally unstable. It must be conditionally unstable, and there must be a strong low-level convergence in the grid box. Then only the clouds will grow deeper, right? Conditional instability, you know that. But in this situation, also there are two types of systems. One is called the dynamically small system, another is called the dynamically large system. Now, dynamically small systems means now like turbulence, individual cumulus cells. Okay, whereas the dynamically large systems are tropical cyclones, mesoscale convective complexes, etc. How do we separate them? We separate them by the Rossby radius of deformation. We say that when the scale length of the system is smaller than the Rossby radius of deformation, then it is called the dynamically small systems. And such systems are difficult to parameterize. Like individual cumulus cloud, turbulence, etc., they are very difficult to parameterize in the model. Right? And so, even today also, we parameterize, when we say the parameterization, we try to parameterize the effect of the ensemble of clouds, not just one individual cloud, but an ensemble of the clouds over the grid box. Right? Then only we can successfully do that. And these are some of the underlying basic fundamental principles for the parameterization. Right? Whereas the dynamically large systems, whose length scale, horizontal length scale is greater than or equal to the Rossby radius of deformation, they are easy to parameterize, like MCS, large scale convective complexes, or the tropical cyclones, etc., and the small scale convective systems, etc. So they are easy to parameterize. Now, among these schemes, among these types of systems, there are many types of schemes which have been proposed and tested by many researchers, authors, right? And also for different types of models, right? Earlier days, there used to be distinct mesoscale models and distinct global model, because global model used to have coarser grid resolution, which we could run on the smaller computers, and mesoscale models used to have the finer grid resolutions, which we could run also on the smaller computers. Right, so we used to have separately mesoscale models and the global models, large scale models, because of the limitation of the computer. But nowadays, because computer power has increased, so slowly the significance of the mesoscale models are decreasing, in the sense that now not many people use separately the mesoscale models. Of course, still it is very much important and popular among the research community, because everybody doesn't have access to the supercomputer. Right? Like we don't have this access to the supercomputer in Central University of Rajasthan. Do we have access to the supercomputer? No, we don't have.
So,
Right? Yeah. Whereas now the government, large laboratories, organizations like NC, MRWF, IMD, IITM, NQuas, they have the access to the big computers, like petascale computer they have. Right? So because everybody doesn't have access to the supercomputers, therefore we still have to use the mesoscale models, and that's why the WRI is so popular and so important, right? And so important also because it has revolutionized the NWP among the scientific community. With such a nice support and documentations available, and so much of versatility in the model, that now everybody is now able to quickly learn, very easily learn the NWP model. Otherwise, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was so difficult, right? So mesoscale models still exist, but when they were developed, say 10, 15 years ago, separately there used to be mesoscale models. Then there used to be separate parameterizations for cumulus convection for the mesoscale models, and separately for the large scale models, virtually because of the size of the grid box, right? So the mesoscale models, as you know, generally are supposed to have grid size less than or equal to 50 kilometer, right? When the size of the grid is less than or equal to 50 kilometer, then they are supposed to be the mesoscale models. Whereas when it is larger than the 50 kilometer, then it is a large scale model. Because nowadays, in WRI model, very easily we can have 10 kilometer resolution, 2 kilometer resolution, or even 1 kilometer resolution. Right? But that is because of the development of the tool, technology, computer power, etc. So the mesoscale models, which have the grid length less than or equal to 50 kilometer, may be able to explicitly resolve the mesoscale convective complexes like square lines, right? Because typically the square lines have the horizontal grid length of 100 kilometer, right? But they must parameterize the convective scale processes. Now, the scale is 0.1 to 10 kilometer. We were talking yesterday that individual cumulus cloud has a horizontal length of what, 1 to 10 kilometer, right? And 0.1 is much smaller, of course. 0.1 becomes 100 meters. Well, that is very small cell, but it is also likely to have. So for this mesoscale models, many people proposed different way of parameterization of the cumulus convection, deep cumulus convection, right? We're talking about the deep cumulus convection now. One category was proposed by Pittsburgh and Perky in 76, 77, in which now the convective plumes were activated when conditional instability was greater than a critical value in that grid, in each grid box. Then there was another scheme proposed by Frisch and Chapman in 1980, in which he hypothesized or postulated that convection occurs when there is a available buoyant energy, ABE, in the grid box. Okay, and he defined the available buoyant energy by this expression, right? ABE, the available buoyant energy, is given by the difference of the temperature of the cloud over the surrounding environment and integration of that from LFC, that is level of free convection, to the ETL, the equilibrium temperature level. You know all these things, right? LFC and ETL. We have studied in the
Yes, sir.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Thermodynamic diagrams, right? Diagrams. So integrated value from the level of free convection, or you can say from the base of the cloud to the top of the cloud. Right? cloud base to cloud top, the integrated value of the excess temperature of the clouds over the environment. That is called the ABE, the available point energy. So Frisch and Chappell, he assumed that in a grid box, the deep convection will occur when there is a available point energy. Okay, and then he calculated the inverse warming and moistening. Then another scheme which was very popular, which is still popular, is the Kane-Frisch 1990. Now the closure of this scheme is same as the Frisch-Chappell, which we just talked about. That is, convection removes CAPE. Well, no, CAPE is the convective available potential energy, right? And it sounds like paradoxical, because generally clouds can occur only when there is a CAPE, right? Only when there is a convective available potential energy, then only the clouds can form. Convection can occur, right? That is one of the important parameters of the diagnostics of the model, right? We try to verify the CAPE. How much is the CAPE? We try to plot the CAPE, right? So the convective clouds occur only when there is a CAPE. But here it says that the convection removes the CAPE, right? And that's true because actually for the development of convection or the convective cloud, CAPE is important. But once the clouds have developed, it has a lifetime, right? It has a lifetime of 1 hour, 2 hour, whatever, right? Approximately. And after the cloud's lifetime is over, then it dissipates, right? So when the cloud dissipates, it reduces the CAPE. When the precipitation occurs, when the rainfall occurs, the CAPE is reduced, right? So actually the convection, the net effect of the convection over a lifetime of the convective cloud is to remove the CAPE, right? So after that, the cloud model, now which was developed or used by Kane and Frisch, he used the cloud model to calculate the heating and moistening rate because of the convective clouds. And in this case, the cloud models modified to include the following. Now, unlike in the case of the Frisch and Chappell, in which only the ABE was there, available point energy, the Kane-Frisch included the additional things, additional features, like he also included the lateral determinant, conservation of mass, thermal energy, total moisture, and momentum. Cumulus momentum transport is also included, right? So all these extra features was included by Kane and Frisch in 1990 to make it more realistic, right, than compared to the Frisch and Chappell of 1980, right? So these additional features are given by this expression, like the rate of change of alpha, where alpha can be temperature or it can be moisture also, right? Or it can be momentum also. The rate of change of alpha with respect to time because of the convection or convective cloud is given by this expression. And in that you can see that all possible things are incorporated, like WU2 is the updraft velocity. U indicates the updraft, WD2, D indicates the downdraft, right? The updraft velocity and the downdraft velocity times that alpha, which could be temperature or moisture, or momentum, whatever, okay? And the subscript 2 indicates the level number 1, level number 1, level number 2, and so on, right? Minus, same thing, WU1 plus WD2, WD1 times alpha 1. Okay, so this term includes your updraft and downdraft effect, okay, in calculating the rate of change of that quantity because of the convection, plus epsilon u, that is the entrainment in the updraft. We have discussed about the entrainment now process yesterday, okay, plus the detrainment. D here indicates the detrainment. D actually is used for both the things, D for detrainment and D for downdraft, both. So here is the entrainment in the updraft and entrainment, entrainment in the updraft and entrainment in the downdraft, okay, times alpha m indicates the mean of the layer, minus detrainment is actually here, del u, this is the detrainment on the updraft, alpha um minus alpha DM in the downdraft. So this is the effect because of the entrainment process, and this is the effect because of the detrainment process. Right? Yesterday we talked about, in the convective clouds, there are entrainment and detrainment process. There are lateral entrainment, there are lateral detrainment, and there is also cloud top detrainment. Right? So all these effects are uh, included or incorporated. For instance, Japan tried to include these effects in calculating the rate of change of temperature and moisture because of the convection process. So where alpha is the moisture, temperature, moisture, and momentum, subscripts 1 and 2 denote bottom and top of the layer. U and V are the up and down drafts. Epsilon and delta are rates of entrainment and derailment, and M indicates the mean of the layer. Okay, so this how can press improved the parameterization of deep clouds in the mesoscale model. And it's quite a popular scheme. Many people use it even today also. Okay, Kenfish. And there are many other schemes also available in the WRF model. You can read the documentation of that. So that was about the parameterization of convection in mesoscale models. Now let's see how the parameterization of convection in the large scale models are done. Now here is the lot of again proposals schemes available. Now you know that the large scale models has typically grid size more than or equal to 100 kilometer grid size.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, our side is fine. Sir's problem.
Yeah.
Did anyone call sir? Or shall I call?
Yes, please.
Do the needful.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I was disconnected. I did not realize it. So I have to restart again. Presentation
Yes.
now. Okay. Your entire screen. Share. So I did not even realize, where was I discussing? What point I was discussing? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Are you-
sir.
So what
Yes,
was I?
sir.
Do you remember what I was discussing?
Yes, sir. Parameterization of large-scale models. We were discussing the terms of that equation.
Oh, I see. We're just discussing the terms of this equation. Huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hmm. So, have I discussed the entire equations or not yet?
Sir discussed the entire equation.
Okay, good, good. So, there was about the parameterization of deep convection in the mesoscale model based on the Kane-Priest scheme. Okay. Now, we talk about the parameterization in the large scale model. Did we start that? Did I start that? Or I was disconnected here? Large scale models, when the grid size is more than or equal to 100 kilometers, then they are large scale models. So in this type of model, there are two categories of parameterization scheme for Kimbrus convection. One is involving the cloud model, another is the without involving explicit cloud model. Okay. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Yeah, just tell me because I don't know when I get disconnected. Yeah, I'm using my phone for the internet now. So obviously, the types of the scheme which uses the explicit cloud model are more complex and requires more time for computation, right? For the cumulus heating, warming, cumulus precipitation. Right? And the other type, which does not involve the cloud model, they are more simpler. Okay. Now, in this category of scheme, there are many people who worked on, like Chardin and Elias in 1964, proposed the CISC mechanism. Do you remember the CISC mechanism? CISC mechanism, we talked about, I think, last semester. Who can say what is CISC mechanism? Nobody remembers? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So CISC, is the conditional instability of the second kind. Okay. Conditional instability of the second kind. We have talked about that, I think, in the previous semester. So that means there is also a conditional, you know about the conditional instability, right? Conditional
Yes,
instability.
sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So the instability which purely occurs because of the distribution of temperature and moisture in the vertical, profiles of the temperature and moisture in the vertical, right? When there is stability because of that, there is a conditional instability of the first kind, in which case you know that the lapse rate is between the dry adiabatic lapse rate and the moist adiabatic lapse rate. That is a simple conditional instability. But then there is also another type of instability called this conditional instability of the second kind, which was proposed by Charney and Eliasson. And in which case, actually, this is also one of the important mechanisms proposed for the genesis of these cyclones, tropical cyclones, Sisk mechanism is one of the important hypotheses or ways how the cyclogenesis takes place. Sisk. Okay. So in this case, actually, we had discussed earlier in previous semesters, if I remember correctly, there is a small vortex, suppose for example, in the atmosphere, right? So when there is a vortex or cyclonic vortex, then it will lead to convergence of air, right? When there is a cyclonic circulation, that is associated with the convergence of air, isn't it? So whenever there is a convergence, then that will lead to the rising of the air parcel or rising motion, right? So when there is a rising motion and air parcel ascends upward, then clouds can form easily because at some point of time, level, the condensation will start taking place and clouds will form. So when the clouds form, then latent heat of condensation is released, right? So when the latent heat of condensation is released, then it warms up the surrounding air, right? When the surrounding air is heated, then the temperature gradient increases, which in turn will increase the strength of the vortex. And when the vortex strength or intensity of the vortex increases, then further it will lead to increasing convergence, more convergence, more again deeper clouds, more condensation, more convective heating. So all together they cooperate with each other to grow the clouds deeper and deeper, and that's how this cyclogenesis takes place. So Sisk mechanism, right? So in this case also, basically, you're allowing the clouds to form and grow deeper, right? So this is one way of including the effect of the convective clouds, but there is no explicit cloud model in such mechanism, Sisk mechanism. Okay, we just diagnostically compute. Then other category or other people who proposed were Samagronsky et al. 1965, who proposed the dry convective adjustment. Okay, it was a simple way of adjusting the lapse rate. Okay, and the name implies that when the atmosphere is dry, but still the convection can occur. Right, convection can occur even when the atmosphere is dry, right? Because of the strong heating of this Earth surface. And when the heating takes place, the lapse rate will increase, right? And lapse rate can become super adiabatic, very strong lapse rate, which will lead to very strong convection, vigorous convection, right? And that vigorous convection will mix up the lower air temperature with the warmer air temperature, right? The lower levels are warmer than the upper levels, so it will mix up the temperature and it will restore the lapse rate back to the normal, right? So that occurs in the nature, but similar things are to be done also in the model, right? So model checks at each grid point by grid point, where there is a strong super adiabatic lapse rate, and whenever it finds a point at any point of time step, then it will adjust the temperature in the vertical levels, and that is called the dry convective adjustment. So this way also you are mimicking the effect of convection. The convection does what? Basically, it tries to adjust the temperature of the layers of the atmosphere because of the development of the thermals and clouds. Right? So this is dry convective adjustment. But when the atmosphere is moist, then we have got the moist convective adjustment. So Manabe et al. In 1965 proposed a scheme for the moist convective adjustment. Right? So these are the schemes which almost does the same thing as the cumulus convection or cumulus parameterization, but in a very, very simple way. And of course, initially, way back in 1965, long ago, almost like 35 plus 20, how much? 25 years ago? 55 years ago, when these computers were not there and schemes were not complex, many things were not understood clearly. At the time, people used to use this, right? But then slowly they realized that this is not sufficient to include the effect of convective clouds. So they developed more and more complex scheme, right? And Better scheme was developed by Co in 1965, which was further modified and improved in 1974. And I mentioned earlier that Co type scheme is one of the very popular scheme. Then ANTHUS 1977 proposed another scheme which is extension of the Co. We'll talk about that. Maybe now today time is going to be up. Corby et al. 1977, which also is a type of convective mixing based on diffusion. Krishnamurthy et al. You have heard of the name of the Professor T.N. Krishnamurthy, right? In 1983, he also proposed a scheme which was an extension of the Co. Right? Bates-Miller, again another popular scheme, very popular scheme. Now does not have a explicit cloud model, but it does almost all the things which a typical cumulus parameterization scheme is supposed to do. It is also a kind of convective adjustment scheme. Right? Zelon, 1985, is also an extension of the Co scheme. Right? We also tested many types of Co scheme in 1988, using the Monex data. Right? So these are the different variants of the parameterization of deep convection in large scale model without using a explicit cloud model. Okay, I see that is already time 3:30. You have a class?
Yes,
3:30?
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I have to stop here. I thought that I will finish this skill today, but it is not possible. So we'll continue tomorrow. Okay.
Okay, sir.
We have to stop today because it's already 3:30. So I'm going slow, very much slow, but I have to increase my speed. I have to stop presentation. I have to stop recording. Okay. So